Evil seeks evil.
Hellraiser Judgment stars Randy Wayne, Paul T. Taylor, Heather Langenkamp, and is directed by Gary Tunnicliffe. What is up, guys? My goal was to actually finish my Hellraiser reviews before Hellraiser Judgment came out, but I missed the mark by 2. I just reviewed Deader, and I believe there's 2 more I have to do, not including Judgment. But I figured, you know what, I want to get a review out as quick as possible if it's a new movie, and Judgment is a new movie, so we're going to do this. Also, quick shout out to Vampire Mike, who is a good friend. You are a good friend, buddy. And let me just say, guys, after going through so many of these movies, and most of them being just really bad, and not even like fun bad, but just like almost depressing bad, Judgment is a refreshing movie. It is. I have some good news for you. This is probably the best Hellraiser movie since Hell on Earth, I would say. Although I think it's a little bit better than Hell on Earth. So, major props to Gary Tunnicliffe, who actually wrote, directed, and starred as one of the most interesting characters in the movie, The Auditor. Bravo to you, good sir. But quick plot synopsis. The story of Hellraiser Judgment, you got these 2 detectives. They are brothers. What is it with detectives in Hellraiser movies? They just love detectives. But they're brothers. They're investigating this serial killer case involving this character called the Preceptor. And these 2 brothers, they're very different. One of them is more straight-laced, and the other one, he has a rough past. And he really is our main character of the movie. And his name is David Carter. But one particular case that he goes to kind of sets this thing into motion, because there's this attractive female at the beginning of the movie, and she is killed by the serial killer. And he does this weird thing. He actually entombs her dog inside of her. So it's really freakish types of murders. And a little segue here, this movie is not for the squeamish. There is some pretty graphic scenes in this movie involving blood. Probably one of the bloodiest, most graphic Hellraiser movies yet. And that is kind of one of my cons, but we'll get to that. But one particular case that he has leads him to this, what looks like an old abandoned house. And that happens to be the location of the Auditor and, you guessed it, Pinhead. Now, first, let's talk about the Auditor, played by Gary Tunnicliffe. I think he has created a character that I haven't seen before in the Hellraiser franchise. Now, granted, I've missed the last 2 movies, so correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time we've seen this character. And thank God, he's really interesting. You know, because most of the time the Cenobites, they're kind of one note, but the Auditor, he's actually polite. We have a polite Cenobite, people. But I like how he brings the sinners in, because at the beginning of this movie, the Auditor and Pinhead, they get together and they say, hey, the earth has gone to shit and we need to take care of this problem. So let's have an audit. So anyway, they set these guys down and they say, what have you done bad? You know, they got to go through the Auditor first. And don't lie to me, because if you lie to me, it's going to be really bad. And so they have to pretty much spill their guts, and almost literally. And then this first guy, this first victim, I guess you could say, of the Auditor, who's very polite to him, he gets tortured, pretty much, goes through hell. I mean, this is like the worst version of hell that you could possibly imagine, or at least for me anyway. I mean, my imagination can only go so far, and this would be a pretty bad day in hell. But eventually, our main character, Detective David Carter, ends up at this location, sitting in front of the Auditor. And the way he handles himself, like a detective would, he's direct, right to the point, and I found that scene really interesting, actually. It just grabbed me. He did what you didn't expect him to do, you know, because the first guy, he was scared to death. You know, his first reaction was, what the hell is this? But this guy, it's almost like he didn't even give a shit. And I like characters like that. And he was a good character throughout this movie. He reminds me of Aaron Eckhart, actually. But eventually he is released from this location, but he's not the same. He is, I guess you could say, tainted, and it affects him throughout the rest of the movie. And so it gets in the way of him trying to solve this case as well. And there's all kinds of twists that happen along the end of the movie, which I don't want to spoil it for you, although I will talk about one little spoiler thing after the rating. Now, let's talk about Pinhead. Why did I say it like that? Pinhead is just one of the most iconic characters ever, right? This is the first time I've seen Pinhead portrayed by anybody other than Doug Bradley. To give credit to Paul T. Taylor, if anybody were to pick up the mantle, I would welcome him. He does a good enough job. Is he as good as Doug Bradley? No, not at all. Doug Bradley just has this presence. And I think it takes another actor stepping into the Pinhead clothes to make you realize how great Doug Bradley is in this role. There's just this like bravado to him. But like I said, Paul T. Taylor still does a pretty damn good job actually. And that was the biggest thing that I was afraid of. I was afraid that as soon as Pinhead entered the frame and it not being Doug Bradley, I was gonna check right out. And that didn't happen because I was completely invested into this story. But you have this other character named Jovial, which is an angel, which is something we've never seen in the Hellraiser franchise before. This is the good, because there's always the bad, but we never really see, you know, the good like up there. And we have that presence in this movie, and she plays a major part in this. And the actress that plays her, Helena Grace Donald, looks a lot like Jane Krakowski from 30 Rock. But the way she figures into this story, especially in the third act, I found pretty riveting. But the biggest compliment I can give Hellraiser Judgment is it was an engaging story. This is something that I haven't seen in the last, 5 movies? The last few movies were scripts that were not Hellraiser scripts, and then all of a sudden they plugged Pinhead in there, and this was not that at all, and that was so refreshing. This felt like an actual Hellraiser movie where Pinhead was a center character in the movie. He was very important. And I just said this in my last review. It worked. If you center around Pinhead, if you start your story from Pinhead, you could probably have a good movie. And that's what we have here, people. We have a good movie. The characters are engaging, the plot is engaging, the twists are pretty cool. Everything works, I think, in Judgment, actually. Now, it's not perfect, okay? Brace yourself. Let's talk about the cons. First thing, and I can't really fault this movie too much, is it does feel a little bit more low budget. And if you think back to those first 2 Hellraiser movies, hell, even the third one, they feel bigger, like on a larger scale. This one does feel smaller, but you know, I can't fault them that much because, you know, there's a lot of movies that feel small scale that are fantastic. So I think they take advantage of that as much as they can, and it doesn't hurt it that much. There were a few scenes, especially the scenes with Pinhead, though, I was like, man, if they had like, you know, the set design that they have for some of those big iconic Pinhead scenes, this one just felt a little bit smaller. Also, here's my biggest complaint about this, and this is just about personal preference. The gore in this movie. I know some people are gore hounds. They love gore, and that's great. But for me, it just went a little bit too far, and really it's only in like the first act of the movie. They don't really have that for the rest of the movie. And there's still bloody type stuff along the way that I loved, that I was all about. Don't get me wrong, people, I love blood in my horror movies. But when you watch this movie, you'll see what I'm talking about. I think they go a little bit too far with some of the scenes. And some of the scenes I was just feeling pretty squeamish about, you know. And some of them involve spit. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. And lastly, for the cons, the very last scene in the movie, I didn't like it. I think they should have ended it at a certain point and then called it a day. But instead, they had to tack on this extra thing that would, you know, open it up for more sequels. Although, even if they didn't put that scene in there, it would still open it up for more sequels, definitely. So I thought they should have ended it at a certain point. But overall, guys, I'm definitely gonna give this movie a high humdrum, okay? I'm not gonna quite get it to a purchase worthy. It's not a Hellraiser movie that I'm gonna run right out. I think it looks really rosy right now, given the previous movies that have come before it. I think that's the big thing. I'm giving it a high humdrum though, which is good for a Hellraiser movie at this stage. And real quick, the spoiler that I was wanting to talk about was that very last scene. And it's really a showdown between Jovial and Pinhead and the Auditor. And because he, you know, does his Pinhead thing to Jovial, she punishes him and releases him back to Earth. And you know, when I say it, I guess it sounds kind of cool, but the way it played out, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I wanted Pinhead to stay Pinhead and then maybe move the story in a different direction for the next movie and have Jovial come back. That would have been awesome. So guys, that's it. What are your thoughts on Hellraiser Judgment? Looking forward to hearing them. I have 2 more Hellraiser reviews I got to do, and then I can finally wrap up this whole series. Looking forward to doing that. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day. And on Fridays, we do Free For All Fridays. Just added some new mods because the site is just getting bigger and bigger. We're over 2,600 members now. And so, yeah, we wanted to add some new mods because right now it's just me, Dylan, and Leela. So, thankfully, we got these new guys to help us out. And I'm going to give those mods a shout out. We got Matt Vicary, Gary Lee, Matt Myers, Cody Leach, Jason Smith, Andrew Becker, and Stephen Arthur. And Jason Smith just came up with this idea that we're going to start doing themed weeks, where one week we might have like femme fatales, you know, women in horror. You know, it could be anything, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So anyway, guys, you can follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and be sure you follow me on Stardust. I'm almost at like 300 Stardust members now, which is really cool. And that's just a fun way to give your quick 30-second reviews. It's getting to be a really popular app. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.